My name is Alan Harris, and I'm 36 years old. For the past 10 years, I've worked as a network manager for a large insurance company in Cincinnati, Ohio. To be successful in my role, I must be proactive, anticipate problems, and think logically to solve issues and keep our network running. This is critical because the company loses thousands of dollars for every minute the network is down. For the most part, I've been able to apply the skills I've learned on the job to the rest of my life. I try to prevent problems before they arise and think carefully and rationally before reacting to issues I couldn't foresee. This approach has served me well until recently, when I faced challenges that tested my ability to stay rational and logical. Although I didn't know it at the time, my problems began last June when my family and I traveled to Paducah, Kentucky, for a wedding. Paducah is my wife Tracy's hometown, and the bride was Tracy's cousin. At the wedding, Tracy ran into Jill Tanner, an old school friend of hers. Jill suggested we meet her and her husband, Frank, for drinks that evening after the reception. Tracy and I left our 9-year-old son Matthew and 7-year-old daughter Lisa with her parents and headed out to meet her friends. Since I hadn't spent much time in Paducah, Tracy guided us to Brian's barn, where Jill and Frank were waiting. Brian's barn isn't just the name of the establishment. It's also a perfect description. The bar was set in a restored barn, featuring a large central room with a round bar in the middle, tables scattered along the outer walls, and a dance floor at one end. A band was set up behind the dance floor, though they weren't playing yet when we arrived. We spotted Jill and Frank at a table across the room. Jill waved as we entered, and after quick introductions, we ordered drinks and began chatting. It turned out Frank also worked in computer networks, and soon, he and I were deep in conversation, exchanging stories about strange and unusual network problems we'd encountered over the years. By the time the band started playing, we were so engrossed in our conversation that I didn't notice when Tracy and Jill left the table. It wasn't until I looked up, realizing my beer was empty, that I noticed their absence. "There are a lot of people our age hanging out here," Frank shouted over the music. Tracy and Jill probably ran into some old friends. We decided to grab another beer. As we stood at the bar, I noticed Tracy talking to a man across the room. He looked about my height and likely around the same age. From their expressions, I could tell they knew each other. I'm not usually a jealous person, and Tracy has never given me a reason to doubt her. She's always been trustworthy. As far as I could tell, their conversation was completely innocent, so I didn't let it bother me. Frank and I returned to our table and continued our discussion about broadband content delivery. Not exactly a topic Tracy and Jill would find interesting. About an hour later, Tracy and Jill returned. The moment Tracy sat down, I could tell by her expression that it was time for me to stop chatting with Frank and include the girls in the conversation. The rest of the evening was pleasant. I really liked Frank and Jill. Before leaving, we even invited them to visit us in Cincinnati for a Reds baseball game. On the drive back to Tracy's parents' house, I asked her about the man she'd been talking to. "It was Barry Fox," she said. "He was my friend in high school. I'm sorry I was gone so long, but it was fun catching up with friends I haven't seen in years. We told stories about school and caught up on what everyone else is doing." "I'm glad you had fun," I replied. "I was so engrossed in my conversation with Frank, I didn't even notice you'd left the table." "Aren't Jill and Frank cute?" Tracy asked. "Yes, I really like them," I said. "You know, they got married right after graduation," she continued. "Everyone said they'd get divorced. Nobody thought they'd last. But here they are, 18 years later, and Jill says they still love each other." "We've been together for 14 years, I pointed out. "Do you still love me?" "You know I do," Tracy said softly. Then she leaned over and kissed me. The next morning, after thanking Tracy's parents for hosting us and watching the kids, We set off on a 4-hour drive back to Cincinnati. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, I was in my workshop sharpening the lawnmower blade. Tracy had just left to get groceries when the phone rang. Since I need to be reachable in case of network issues on weekends, I installed a telephone in my workshop. I also carry a pager and cell phone as backups. I picked up on the third ring. My son Matthew answered first. "Hello," Matthew said. "Hello. Who is this?" the caller asked. "I'm Matthew." "Well, hello, Matthew. Is your mother at home?" I was about to speak but decided to see how my 9-year-old handled the call. "No, sir," Matthew said. "My mother just went to the store. Can I take a message?" I felt proud of him. He handled the situation exactly as I had taught him. "Yes, thank you," the caller replied. "I'm an old friend of your mother. My name is Barry. Could you tell her I called?" "Yes, sir. I'll tell her you called," Matthew said politely. "Tell your mom that I'll call her at 8 o'clock this evening," Barry added. "I will tell her." "Thank you, Barry," Matthew responded. Hearing the name Barry surprised me. Could this be the same Barry Tracy had talked to in Paducah? Why would he call Tracy? These questions made my stomach clench slightly, but I figured I'd have to wait until 8 o'clock to find out what he wanted. I managed to push the questions aside and went back to work. About half an hour later, having finished outside, I headed into the house to take a shower. Afterward, when I noticed Tracy still wasn't home, my curiosity about Barry Fox got the better of me. I did something I'd never done before. I went into Tracy's closet and pulled out a box where she keeps personal items of special meaning. I had no intention of invading her privacy. I just wanted to find her high school yearbook. I first saw it years ago when we moved in together during graduate school. It was in this same box, full of personal belongings. Back then, Tracy explained that everything in the box predated our relationship and was important to her. She said the items were personal and confidential, and while she wasn't hiding anything, she'd prefer I not look through them. I told her I didn't need to know what was inside. Now, as I opened the box, I was careful. Inside, I found letters I had sent Tracy during the summer after we first met. There was an invitation to our wedding, along with every birthday, anniversary, Valentine's Day, and Mother's Day card I had ever given her. By the time I reached the bottom of the box, I felt surprisingly reassured. The only thing unrelated to our life together was Tracy's high school yearbook. Seeing this comforted me. She hadn't held on to anything else from before we met. I didn't expect her to get rid of the yearbook, of course. I still had mine. I opened it and turned to Tracy's graduation photo. At 17, she was beautiful, and I could see the woman I married in her face. Slowly, I flipped through the pages, scanning notes written by her friends. They were the usual high school messages I recognized from my own yearbook. "I'll always remember how much fun we had in Mr. S.'s class," or "I know we'll be friends forever." Then I turned to the section for students whose last names began with F. I found Barry Fox's photo. Next to it, he had written a long note to Tracy. Though it was written 18 years ago, long before I knew her, his words unsettled me. "My dear Tracy," the note began, "I can't express how much you've meant to me these last 6 months. I'm so in love with you that sometimes I feel like I might explode. Last week, while your parents were out of town, you made me feel like a real man for the first time in my life. You're the only thing on my mind, and I know I will love you for the rest of my life. I can't wait for summer so we can be together all the time." I didn't need to read it twice to understand. Barry's words were clear. I'd never thought much about Tracy's previous relationships before, but Barry's note made me anxious. Still, I knew it shouldn't. I felt guilty for invading her privacy and regretted reading it. At that moment, I heard Tracy's car pull into the garage. My heart jumped, and I quickly placed the yearbook back at the bottom of the box and returned everything to its original place. I made sure I left no trace of my snooping. I quickly left the room, instinctively avoiding being there when Matthew told Tracy about Barry's call. Originally, I'd planned to be present when she received the message so I could ask her directly why Barry was calling. But at the last moment, I decided to wait for Barry's call at 8 o'clock and see what she would say about it. Tracy had never been sneaky or underhanded, so I couldn't understand why I reacted the way I did. I didn't have a plan. I just let my instincts take over. When I returned to the kitchen, Tracy was still putting away groceries. She looked at me with a strange expression. "Where did you disappear to so suddenly?" she asked. "I needed to go to the toilet," I replied. At that moment, Matthew chimed in. "Someone named Barry called and said he would call back at 8 o'clock. Tracy looked at me. "Do you know anything about this?" "No," I said casually. "When did he call?" "Matthew said at 3 o'clock, Tracy replied. "Matthew's very good at taking messages, isn't he?" I added, trying to sound lighthearted and hide my discomfort. I wondered if Matthew had mentioned to Tracy that Barry claimed to be an old friend. Did Tracy think it might be someone else named Barry? That seemed unlikely. It was too much of a coincidence for it to be anyone but her friend Barry from Paducah. "What do you think he wants?" I asked. "Probably someone collecting money for charity," Tracy said. "Or another one of those calls asking for a credit card." She said this awkwardly, and I felt my tension rise. Tracy was honest about the phone message, but she wasn't completely truthful. She didn't admit that it was Barry, her old friend from Paducah. That made me change my approach. Now, I wanted to hear that phone call myself. "Perhaps you're right," I said, trying to sound casual. "Lately, we've been getting a lot of offers for credit cards." For the rest of the day, Tracy was unusually quiet and seemed distracted. At dinner, she hardly looked at me and focused all her attention on Matthew and Lisa. I started to feel like I'd done something wrong, that maybe Tracy was upset with me. But I knew that wasn't the case. At 7:30 p.m., I told Tracy, "I took the lawnmower apart earlier, so I'm going to the workshop to put it back together. I want to mow the lawn tomorrow." Relief flashed across her face. I guess Tracy was glad I wouldn't be in the house when Barry called at 8 o'clock. What she didn't realize was that I planned to listen to the call. At 8:10, the phone finally rang. I waited for the light on my workshop phone to indicate the line was active. Then I picked up the handset and pressed the mute button so I could listen undetected. "Hello," Tracy answered. "Hi, Tracy. It's Barry. How are you?" "Hello, Barry. I'm fine," Tracy said, sounding surprised. "This is unexpected." "I hope it's a nice surprise," Barry replied. Tracy didn't comment. "I just wanted to call and tell you how glad I was to see you after all these years," Barry continued. "I was glad to see you too," Tracy said. "When I got home and told Karen I saw you, she was angry she missed you. She asked me to tell you to call her next time you're in Paducah. I wish Karen had been there. I'd love to see her," Tracy added. "I'm glad Karen wasn't there," Barry said, his tone light but pointed. "I wouldn't have been able to dance with you like that if my wife were there." "What dance?" Alarm bells went off in my head. "We shouldn't have danced like that," Tracy said quietly. "My husband was on the other side of the room and could have easily seen us." "You didn't seem to mind at the time," Barry replied. "I'd had too much to drink," Tracy said. My mind raced. What had happened on that dance floor? Tracy hadn't mentioned anything about dancing that night. After that, the conversation turned into a regular exchange between friends, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I just heard. I decided that, no matter what had happened that evening, I wouldn't let it become a problem. I was starting to think the call was wrapping up when Barry dropped another surprise. "Tracy, My sales territory has changed, and I'll be coming to Cincinnati several times a year, Barry said. I'm expecting to arrive in about 3 weeks, and I was wondering if I could take you to dinner when I'm in town. Tracy paused for a moment. Then she said, I'm not sure Alan would be comfortable with me going to dinner with one of my old boyfriends. One of your old boyfriends? Barry said, I hope I wasn't just one of your old boys. Anyway, I wasn't planning on inviting your husband to come with us. I can't go to dinner with you, Tracy replied. Why not? Isn't it obvious? We're both married, and I don't go on dates with anyone other than my husband. I felt relieved to hear her say this. It's just a dinner between old friends, nothing special. When we were talking at the barn, I got the feeling you wanted more time to talk, Barry insisted. I really wanted to find out what happened to a few more of our old friends, Tracy said. Okay, then we'll have dinner, and you can tell me what's going on with all of our friends back in Paducah. The way Tracy phrased her response alarmed me. Just dinner and conversation? Her question sounded like she was seriously considering his invitation. Yes, dinner and conversation, Barry agreed before adding, and then we'll see what happens next. At that moment, I wanted to scream into the phone, but I didn't. I don't think that's a good idea, Tracy said firmly. Listen, Tracy, I wouldn't have asked to meet you if your kiss hadn't told me you share my desire, Barry said. Barry, do not say that. It was just a friendly kiss. Don't read anything more into it, Tracy shot back. The knots in my stomach grew tighter. Tracy seemed to resist Barry, but not firmly enough to convince him, or me, that she wasn't interested. I'll give you time to think about it, Barry said smoothly. I'll call you again when I know exactly when I'll be in Cincinnati. No, you can't call me, Tracy said abruptly. Alan will get suspicious about these calls, and I don't know how I'd explain them to him. Well, then, what's your number at work? Barry asked. I can't have you calling me at work, Tracy replied, sounding exasperated. At that moment, I felt a small sense of relief, like Tracy was putting her foot down. She was basically telling Barry not to contact her again. Can I send you an email? Barry asked. Yes, it's better this way, Tracy agreed. I listened in horror as she gave him her email address. I felt like I was going to throw up. Fine, Barry said. Look for my email next week. Tracy, you know I still love you. Don't say that, Barry, Tracy said quietly. And then the conversation ended. I hung up the phone and sat there in silence, stunned. My emotions were all over the place. I felt like I couldn't breathe. So I left the house and walked around the block to clear my head. As I walked, I tried to make sense of what I had just heard. Barry had asked my wife to have an affair. Tracy might convince herself it was just dinner, but she had to know there was more to it than that. Barry had said he'd be in Cincinnati several times a year, which suggested to me that he was considering a long-term affair. If he didn't succeed in getting Tracy into bed on his first visit, he would keep trying. Every time I thought about it, anger consumed me. Irrational thoughts flooded my mind. If she sleeps with him, I'll throw her stuff out on the street and beat the crap out of him. I had to keep talking to myself to calm down. I couldn't think rationally. I was overwhelmed with emotions, mostly anger and betrayal. By the time I got back to the house, I'd managed to calm down enough to face Tracy without exploding. When I walked inside, Tracy looked at me cheerfully for a moment before asking, "Where have you been?" "I went to your workshop, but you weren't there." "I was restless, and it's a beautiful night," I said. "So, I took a walk around the block." "Are you still uneasy?" she asked. "I don't know, but what if—" I trailed off. "Let's walk around the block again," Tracy said, her voice gentle. "This time, I'll go with you." I didn't want to be in a situation where I'd have to talk to her, so I said, I don't think we should leave the kids home alone. You're probably right, she agreed quietly. Without another word, I walked past her into the living room, sat down, and turned on the TV. For the next hour and a half, I didn't say a word. Tracy sat with me, silent as well. At 11 o'clock, I turned off the TV and went to bed. She followed me without saying anything. In the bedroom, I undressed, pulled on my boxer shorts and t-shirt, and slipped into bed. Tracy got in next to me, and I immediately rolled onto my side, facing away from her. I lay there for what felt like 15 minutes, trying to fall asleep, but fragments of Tracy's conversation with Barry kept replaying in my mind. I wouldn't have been able to dance with you like that if my wife were there. Now I'll come to Cincinnati several times a year. Dinner and conversation, and then we'll see what happens next. Your kiss told me you share my desire. The words were spinning in my head when I suddenly felt Tracy press her body gently against my back. She reached up and began playing with my hair. Are you awake? She whispered. I almost didn't answer. Yes. Do you know how much I love you? Tracy asked softly. Her question made me so angry that I wanted to say, as much as you love Barry? But I bit my tongue. No, I really don't know, I replied coldly. I felt her body tense behind me. She clearly wasn't expecting that response. How can you not know? She asked quietly. Isn't it obvious to you that I love you more than anything in the world, with the possible exception of Matthew and Lisa? With this revelation, I almost pounced on her. I wanted to shout, if you love me so much, why did you kiss Barry that night? If you love me so much, why are you even considering having dinner with him when he comes to Cincinnati? But I didn't say anything. Tracy leaned on her elbow and looked at me. I love you. For the first time in my life, I felt anger when I heard Tracy say she loved me. That night, I discovered that anger and excitement are a strange combination. The next day at work, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hacked Tracy's email password. It wasn't very difficult. Her password was Matthew's initials and Lisa's date of birth. Only the third password I tried. I installed MSN Instant Messenger on my work computer and linked it to Tracy's email address so I would be notified every time she received a message. Luckily, Tracy only accessed her email during the day on her work computer. She didn't have a computer at home, and she never used mine. Tracy wasn't particularly fond of computers and only used email to stay in touch with a few friends. She didn't send or receive many messages, so it was easy to monitor. During that first week, Tracy received 7 emails. 4 were from Sue Baxter, a former coworker. They enjoyed exchanging recipes, which was the main topic of conversation that week. The other 3 messages were equally innocent. It wasn't until Tuesday of the following week that Tracy received her first note from Barry. It was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was on the phone with Tracy, discussing what she wanted me to pick up from the store on my way home, when I heard the unmistakable ping of a new email. In the lower right corner of my screen, a small window appeared. You have received an email from foxmanxx.com. I felt a sharp, painful squeeze in my chest, but I kept my voice steady and finished the conversation with Tracy. At 5 o'clock, I called Tracy's work phone to make sure she had already left for the day. Once I confirmed she was gone, I opened her email account and found Barry's message. I was terrified she would have already read it and deleted it, but she hadn't. Hi, Tracy. Just wanted to let you know I'll be in Cincinnati next Monday. I'll be staying at the Marriott downtown, and I'd love for you to have dinner with me. Love, Barry. My hands were shaking as I opened the sent folder. I needed to see Tracy's reply. My heart pounded as I clicked the message, afraid of what I'd find. Barry, I'd like to see you again, but only for dinner. I don't want you to expect more. Tracy. There was no comfort in her words. Although she told Barry not to expect more than dinner, she still accepted his invitation. Worse, she didn't explicitly say there wouldn't be anything more, only that he shouldn't expect it. I was certain Barry took that note as a positive response, just as I took it as a negative one. From that moment, the relationship between Tracy and me began to unravel. When I got home that night, I was seething with anger, but I couldn't confront her because I couldn't admit what I had done. So I pretended everything was fine. Tracy, on the other hand, seemed preoccupied, as though something was on her mind that she couldn't share with me. The silence between us was heavy. Tracy tried to initiate intimacy that night, but I pretended to be asleep, refusing to respond. The next morning at breakfast, Tracy was unusually quiet. I could sense she wanted to say something but couldn't bring herself to do it. I quickly finished my meal, grabbed my briefcase, and headed for the door, much earlier than I normally would. I just wanted to get out of the house. As I reached the door, Tracy began to speak. "I love you." But I closed the door behind me before she could finish. "I love you" was what Tracy had said to me every morning for as long as I could remember. But that morning I didn't want to hear it. That day, Tracy didn't call me at work as she usually did. To me, this was a sign, proof that she wasn't thinking about me the way she used to. By the end of the day, I checked her email and saw she had received 4 new messages. All 4 emails that day were from Barry. I waited until 5 o'clock again to check Tracy's inbox. The first note from Barry read, "Hi Tracy, I've made dinner reservations for 7:30 Tuesday night. Let's meet at the Maria Bar at 7 o'clock. Looking forward to seeing you." Tracy's reply gave me a small glimmer of hope. "I'm not sure if I can come." Barry's next email pushed harder. "You have to come. We need to find out if there's magic between us. If there's nothing there, at least we'll both know. Isn't it better to know than to guess? And maybe regret that we never tried to find out? Please come." Tracy responded, "I will come, but you must understand this is only dinner and nothing more. We are both married, and we shouldn't look for any magic." Barry's reply came quickly. "Great. I'm really looking forward to meeting you. It will make coming to Cincinnati on business that much more worthwhile." Tracy wrote back, "I'm looking forward to meeting you too, but you have to remember what I said." Barry's final email read, "Don't worry, I won't pressure you. I would never force you to do anything you don't want." That last message made my blood boil. Barry was implying that he planned to seduce her, but only with her consent. Not in so many words, of course, but the hidden meaning was clear to me. I doubted Tracy picked up on it, but it enraged me. I sat at my desk for an hour, my mind spinning. What was Tracy thinking? Was she just bored and craving excitement? Or was she genuinely obsessed with this guy? Was she planning to have an affair? The thought flashed through my mind of what I would do if she ended up in bed with him. I had to calm myself down and think rationally. What was the best outcome? It was simple. Tracy would change her mind and tell Barry that she didn't want to see him now or ever. The worst case, Tracy would have an affair with Barry and tell me she loved him, that she wanted a divorce. I didn't believe it would come to that, but I couldn't rule it out. Whatever happened, it would likely fall somewhere in between. I tried to imagine handling each scenario. A one-time fling, a short affair lasting a few months, or, God forbid, a long-term affair lasting years. I couldn't process any of it rationally. My emotions were in complete turmoil. On my drive home that evening, I resolved to try something different. I would be loving and kind to Tracy. Maybe I could convince her not to meet Barry on Tuesday. When I got home, I heard Tracy in the kitchen preparing dinner. I walked in with the intention of kissing her and telling her I loved her. But when I entered the room, she turned away from me and didn't even seem to notice I was there. I shifted tactics. "Hi," I said simply as I left the kitchen. She replied weakly, "Hi." At dinner, Tracy hardly spoke to me. She barely looked at me, but she chatted with Matthew and Lisa, smiling at them like nothing was wrong. Whatever was on her mind, it was directed at me. That evening, after we went to bed, Tracy tried to initiate intimacy again. She waited until the lights were off and we were lying side by side. I turned away and said quietly, "I don't feel well." There was no way I could be intimate with her, knowing she had a date with Barry. On Thursday morning, as I left for work, Tracy didn't even bother saying, "I love you." A couple of days before, I didn't want to hear it. But now, the absence of those words hurt more than I expected. That day, I waited again until 5 o'clock, hoping Tracy would send Barry an email canceling their date. But there was nothing. On Thursday evening, it was the same story. Tracy couldn't meet my eyes when she spoke to me, but once we were in bed, she tried again to be close to me. This time, I couldn't keep silent. "Why don't you tell me what's wrong?" I asked. "What do you mean?" she replied softly. "For more than a week now, I've had the clear impression that I'm not as important to you as I used to be. You barely talk to me, and when you do, you can't look at me. But as soon as we're in bed, you expect me to make love to you. Well, I haven't been feeling any love lately, so I'm not giving it." I paused, then added, "When you're ready to talk and tell me what's going on between us, maybe then we can start being intimate again." I waited for her response, but she turned away from me, silent. That night I couldn't sleep. I could feel how restless she was too. It was as though there was a wall between us, something neither of us could break through. On Friday morning, as I was leaving for work, Tracy stood in front of me. She looked me in the eyes and said softly, "I love you." I looked at her, unsure what to say. I looked into her eyes for a moment. "I really hope you love me," I said and walked out the door. I spent the first 2 hours of Friday morning sitting in my office, trying to decide what to do about the possible consequences of Tracy's upcoming dinner with Barry. My stomach was in knots, and my head was spinning. I thought and thought about the problem but made no progress. Then my mind wandered to all the stories I'd read online over the years about cheating wives. One common theme stood out. The husband discovered his wife was cheating or about to cheat, and did nothing, preferring to wait for evidence to use later as revenge. But I didn't want revenge. I didn't want my marriage to fall apart. I just wanted it to be the way it was before Barry Fox re-entered our lives. Besides, how could I even prove Tracy was having an affair? I was still wrestling with this thought when I was abruptly pulled out of my spiral by the ringing phone. It was a colleague, asking for help with a technical issue. He explained that next week, the marketing team was planning to launch online video streaming, and he was concerned that the surge in traffic would overload a specific network segment, causing outages. "We need to be proactive," I told him. "Let's redistribute the traffic across the network. That way, we'll prevent any overload and ensure we have enough bandwidth to handle the demand." The answer was so simple and clear that when I hung up, I felt a spark of clarity about my personal problem. 2. I began looking at my situation from a different perspective. Instead of worrying about what to do if Tracy cheated, I needed to focus on preventing it from happening. My first thought was to involve Barry's wife. I figured if Karen called Tracy, it might make Tracy feel guilty about what she was doing. Or perhaps Karen could intervene and stop Barry herself. I decided to call Frank, someone I trusted who knew Barry and his wife. "Hello, Frank," I said when he picked up. "It's Alan Harris. How are you?" "Hey, Alan. I'm fine. Glad to hear from you. How are you doing?" I didn't want to jump straight into the real reason for my call. "I was just thinking about you and Jill," I said lightly. "I saw the Reds game in the paper this morning and thought of you. I wanted to see if you're still interested in coming up for a game." Yes, we'd really like to, Frank replied. We'll probably be able to come in August or September. That's great. I'll send you the home schedule so you can pick a weekend when the Reds are in town. Perfect. Is it okay if we bring our son? I know he'd enjoy it. Of course, I said warmly. The invitation's for the whole family. As the conversation reached a natural pause, I added, while I've got you on the phone, could I ask you a little favor? Sure, what do you need? Do you know Barry and Karen Fox? I asked. Yes, I know Barry, Frank said. We work for the same company. Do you happen to have their phone number? Tracy mentioned wanting to reconnect with Karen. She thinks they were close in school, and she was disappointed she didn't get to see her in Paducah. I can give you Barry's number, Frank said. But Karen and Barry divorced about 5 years ago. She remarried and moved to St. Louis. That surprised me. Do you know why they got divorced? I asked, trying to sound casual. Barry was playing the fool, Frank said bluntly. He had 2 or 3 girlfriends at the same time. My heart sank. How long did it take Karen to find out what he was up to? It took her about 6 years, Frank replied. Barry had girlfriends in other cities, Bowling Green, Louisville, and Evansville. He would tell Karen he needed to go on business trips, stay for a day or two, and spend the time with one of his girlfriends. How did she find out? I asked. One day, Karen ran into Barry's boss, Frank explained. Turns out his job doesn't require any travel. Barry isn't even a salesman. He works in a warehouse as an assistant manager. He racks up a lot of overtime hours, but since he's management, he doesn't get paid extra. Instead, the company gives him comp time. He'd work weekends and then take Mondays and Tuesdays off to visit his girlfriends. Has Barry remarried? I asked. No, but he still has a few girlfriends, Frank said. They're scattered within a few hours' drive of Paducah. I sat there stunned. Tracy will be shocked by this information, I finally muttered. Frank and I chatted for a few more minutes before ending the call. After our conversation, I knew enough about Barry to lose any interest in him as a person. I spent the next hour thinking about how to present this information to Tracy. I was certain that once Tracy found out the truth, that Barry had lied about his wife Karen, lied about his business trip to Cincinnati, and that he had other girlfriends scattered across different cities, she would lose interest in him very quickly. At first, I was ready to come home and dump all this information on her. But then another thought occurred to me. If I presented her with this truth now, it would end Barry's hold over her, yes, but not because she chose me over him. It would be because she realized Barry wasn't the man she thought he was. I needed Tracy to make a choice between our marriage and the Barry she thought she knew, not the lying womanizer he really was. It may seem like a foolish argument now, but in that moment it made perfect sense to me. When I got home that evening, I tried to be friendly and considerate, showing Tracy subtle signs that I loved her. But when we got into bed that night, I rolled over and pretended to fall asleep. Saturday and Sunday were painfully difficult for me. I tried to act like everything was fine, but Tracy's behavior didn't change. She still wouldn't look at me when she talked, and it cut me deeply. Did she really dislike me so much that she couldn't even meet my eyes? Monday was better. It was a busy day at work, and the constant stream of tasks kept my mind occupied. I felt some relief knowing that, by the end of the next day, there would be some kind of decision one way or another. When I got home that evening, I tried to act upbeat and happy. I asked Tracy about her day and gently tried to bring up my concerns. Lately, it feels like we're drifting apart, I said carefully. Maybe we just need a little romance to reconnect. I was thinking we could go out for a romantic dinner tomorrow night, and then come home and make love. What do you think? Tomorrow evening doesn't suit me, Tracy replied matter-of-factly. I'm going to dinner and drinks with my girlfriends after work. Her response hit me like a punch to the gut. What a cliché, I thought. She's going out with the girls. Suddenly, I felt like a character in one of those stories about a cheating wife. I think our marriage is more important than going out with friends. Don't you? I pressed. Of course, our marriage is important, Tracy said defensively. But we made these plans last week. It would be hard for everyone to change their schedules now. Not everyone has to change their plans. Just you, I countered. Alan, please, Tracy said, her voice tinged with frustration. Can't we just go to dinner another time? Well, at least I tried, I muttered. If you're going out tomorrow, I'll work late and catch up on a few things at the office. Can you ask Sarah to babysit until you get home? I'll call Sarah, Tracy said, but I'm not sure what time I'll get home. What are you planning to do after dinner? Go and pick up something? I asked sarcastically. Tracy turned her back to me and didn't answer. She didn't take the bait or defend herself. Her silence made me feel like our marriage was in deeper trouble than I had realized. Later that evening, we sat together in the living room watching TV in silence. At 11 o'clock, Tracy stood up to go to bed. When I didn't follow her, she came back into the room. Are you coming to bed? She asked softly. Not yet, I said. I think I'll stay up and watch Letterman. Can't you come now? I don't like sleeping without you, she said. Maybe you should get used to it, I replied coldly. Her face fell. What does that mean? Are you trying to tell me something? No, I said dismissively. Just giving you something to think about. Good night. Tracy stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at me as if she wanted to say something more, but she didn't. Finally, she turned and went to bed. About an hour later, I joined her. Tracy was either asleep or pretending to be. I quietly changed for bed, slipped under the covers, and lay there, staring into the darkness. My mind raced as I thought about what might happen the next evening. Just then, Tracy stirred. I froze, pretending to be asleep. Alan? She whispered softly. I didn't answer, so she said my name again, a little louder. Alan. I stayed still, breathing slowly and deeply. I love you, she whispered into the dark. Then she rolled away from me. Her words enraged me. How could she say that? How could she claim to love me when she had already accepted Barry's invitation to dinner, and maybe more? At that moment, I wanted to shake her and shout, "What the hell are you thinking?" But I didn't. I just lay there, silent, pretending to sleep, while my anger simmered beneath the surface. On Tuesday morning, I woke up at 5 a.m., got out of bed, took a shower, and went downstairs to make coffee. I was sitting at the kitchen counter drinking it when I heard the sound of Tracy stepping into the shower. At that moment, I knew I didn't want to see her. Not this morning. So I quickly finished my coffee, grabbed my things, and left the house. I stopped at a diner for breakfast before heading to work. I spent the entire day trying to stay busy, hoping work would distract me from what I had to do that evening. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Tracy called. When I heard her voice, I silently prayed she would tell me she'd changed her mind, that she'd canceled her plans and wanted to have dinner with me instead. Alan, I just wanted to let you know that I asked Sarah to babysit tonight, she said. I told her you'd probably be home first, but I don't know what time it'll be. She needs to be home by 10 o'clock. It's a school night, she added. You'll be back by then, right? Yes, I'll be home by 10 o'clock. And you should be home too, I said pointedly. When Tracy didn't respond, I quickly said, I'm busy right now. See you later, and hung up before she could say anything else. At 5 o'clock, I was clearing my desk when the phone rang. I instinctively reached for it but stopped myself. I wasn't in the mood to talk, and calls at that time of day often meant trouble. I didn't need another problem. A moment later, my cell phone buzzed. Without even glancing at the screen, I turned it off. I knew if I saw who was calling, it would be harder to ignore. That evening, I stayed in the office until 5:30. Then I walked the 4 blocks to the Marriott Hotel. Entering the lobby, I was surprised by my calmness. "Alan," someone called out. I turned toward the voice, slightly confused, and realized it was a woman standing behind the hotel reception desk, waving at me. I looked closer and recognized her face. As I approached the counter, I couldn't help but smile. "Jackie Washington. How are you?" "Jackie Winters now," she corrected me with a grin. "It's been, 8 years? How are you, Alan?" I don't even want to think about how much time has passed. Except to say it's been too much, I said. "I had no idea you worked here. I see you're the hotel manager now. How long have you been working here?" "I've been at this hotel for 2 years, Jackie replied. "I started as a management trainee at the Marriott in Lexington about 5 years ago. I was assistant manager there until I got promoted and transferred here." "That's impressive," I said sincerely. "I work just 4 blocks away. Maybe we could have lunch sometime." Jackie smiled but shook her head. "I'd love to, but I'm not sure my husband would appreciate it." "Trust me, I understand that," I said. "Why don't you give me your number? We can all go out to dinner sometime. I'd love to meet the guy who finally won your heart." As soon as I said it, I felt a sudden ache in my chest. I wondered if Tracy and I would still be together the next time I spoke to Jackie. After scribbling her number on a piece of paper and handing it to me, Jackie asked, "How's Tracy?" "I think she's fine," I replied carefully. "But that remains to be seen." "What's happened? Do you have a problem you don't want to talk about?" Jackie asked with concern. "I'm here today to see if I can fix it," I replied. "I hope everything works out for you," Jackie said warmly. There was a pause before I spoke again. "I know I shouldn't ask you this, but could you check something for me?" "What would you like me to check?" Jackie asked curiously. "Could you check if Barry Fox is registered here?" "What are you going to do if Mr. Fox is here?" Jackie asked, narrowing her eyes. "Nothing. I just need to know if he's registered," I replied calmly. Jackie looked at me for a moment, then turned to her computer, pressing a few keys. After a short pause, she looked up. "Mr. Fox checked in about an hour ago." "Thank you, Jackie," I said. "I hope you'll tell me what all this is about someday," she said. "It depends on how everything turns out," I replied honestly. "If things go the way I hope, I'll never talk about it again. If they go badly, I might need someone to talk to." Just then, someone approached the desk to speak with Jackie. I said goodbye, promised to call her about dinner, and walked toward the bar. I looked at my watch. It was 5:15 p.m. I had an hour and 45 minutes before Tracy was supposed to meet Barry at the bar. Scanning the room, I found a spot at the back, near the door that led to the hotel lounges. From there, I could sit discreetly at the bar while keeping a clear view of the rest of the room. If Tracy needed to go to the ladies' room, I could slip around the corner of the bar and stay out of sight until the right moment. With that part of my plan decided, I stepped outside the hotel to kill some time and think through what I would say to Tracy later. I knew I couldn't memorize a speech. Something rehearsed would feel inappropriate and forced. Instead, I tried to mentally outline the key points I wanted to convey. This way, I could let the conversation flow naturally while keeping control of my emotions and preventing myself from getting tongue-tied if something unexpected happened. By 6 o'clock, my nerves started to get the better of me, and I decided I needed a drink to steady myself. Before heading back into the bar, I called home on my cell phone. Sarah picked up on the second ring. "Hello, Sarah. This is Mr. Harris. I just wanted to check if everything was okay." "Everything's fine here," she replied cheerfully. Did my wife happen to tell you when she expects to return home this evening? I asked. No, but she knows I need to leave by 10 o'clock, Sarah said. Then she added, she looked great when she left. She was wearing a nice little dress, and her hair was beautifully styled. I hope I look like her when I get older. This was not what I wanted to hear. Thank you, Sarah. I'll be home by 10 o'clock. The call ended, but Sarah's words echoed in my head. Tracy wore a nice little dress. That meant she had decided this evening would be more than just dinner and conversation. I was a mess. I felt crushed, angry, and betrayed. My depression told me to go home, crawl into bed, and forget the world, but my anger wouldn't let me. I wandered aimlessly around the hotel until I managed to calm my emotions. At 6:15, I took a seat at the Marriott's bar, ordered a bourbon with water, and prepared to wait. Halfway through my drink, a man approached the bar next to me and ordered a draft beer. I didn't pay much attention to him at first. After he took his beer, he wandered slowly around the bar, checked a table in a dark corner of the room, and then returned to the bartender. I watched him hand the bartender a $10 bill and engage in a brief conversation. A few moments later, the bartender walked over to the table and hung a small sign, reserved. I didn't think much of it until the man returned to the bar, sat next to me, and ordered another beer. When I finally looked at him, I recognized him immediately. It was Barry. Barry was preparing everything to seduce my wife. What happened next would have been almost comical if I hadn't been so upset. Barry took a sip of his beer, turned to me and said casually, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I wanted to punch him in the face, but I didn't. "Yeah," I muttered. "It's a beautiful day. Makes me wonder what the hell I'm doing here instead of enjoying it outside." I could hardly believe it. Barry was making small talk with me. He had no idea who I was. We talked briefly about the Cincinnati Reds and their chances of winning the pennant. Barry mentioned he was from Paducah, Kentucky, and said he was more of a St. Louis Cardinals fan. We talked about the Cardinals' chances for a bit. At 6:45, Barry checked his watch and said, "I need to run up to my room and get ready for my date. She'll be here in 15 minutes. I like to let them wait a few minutes. It makes them happier to see me when I show up." I felt bile rise in my throat. Barry stood, smiled, and added, "It was nice chatting." Then he left without introducing himself. At 7 o'clock sharp, Tracy entered the bar. Seeing her walk in took my breath away, and not in a good way. It was bad enough that she had come at all, but she looked stunning. Sarah was right. Tracy wore a short black cocktail dress that hugged her figure. She paired it with black stockings, thigh-high, I suspected, not pantyhose. The top of the dress showed just enough cleavage to be alluring without crossing the line into too revealing. The soft light of the bar gave her dark hair a gorgeous shine and made her face look even more beautiful than usual. Seeing her dressed like that for another man was excruciating. I had to take a few deep breaths to calm myself down. Tracy glanced around the room nervously, scanning for Barry. She walked over to the bartender and spoke with him briefly. I saw him point toward the reserved table. Tracy nodded and walked over, sitting down. I watched her carefully. I could tell she was nervous. Over the next 5 minutes, she took her makeup bag out of her purse 3 times to check her face. Each time, she tucked it away, glanced around the bar, and then repeated the process. It was as though she were making sure everything was perfect, yet her hands betrayed her unease. Every time she looked around the room, it was as if she were checking to see if someone she knew might be there. And every time her gaze swept in my direction, I held my breath, afraid she might spot me. At 7:05, Barry finally entered the bar and joined Tracy at the table. I watched as Barry leaned in and kissed Tracy on the cheek before sitting down. My chest tightened. From where I sat, it was clear Tracy was either very nervous or just feeling incredibly awkward. Her hands wouldn't stay still, fidgeting with everything in sight. She placed them on the table, then under the table, one on top of the other, before starting the process all over again. Even when the waitress brought their drinks, Tracy continued to fidget, as though she were struggling to compose herself. For my part, I was a wreck. My stomach churned, and my palms were damp with sweat as I tried to figure out when to make my move. I was running through my options when the decision was made for me. Barry stood up from the table. For a moment, I thought they were heading into the restaurant, and I started to get up, determined to confront Tracy before they disappeared. But Tracy didn't move. Barry walked away toward the bar, and then straight toward me. For an instant, I wondered if he had finally recognized me or if Tracy had noticed me and alerted him. Would there be a showdown between us? My pulse pounded. Barry approached my side of the bar, nodded at me in a casual, friendly manner, and then walked out through the doorway behind me. I turned to see where he was going and realized he had entered the men's room. Now was my chance. I immediately stood up, rounded the bar, and walked toward Tracy. She was busy looking at herself in the compact mirror and didn't notice me until I spoke. "Hello, Tracy." She nearly jumped out of her seat. Her face turned pale as she looked up at me, stunned. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice shaky. "I decided to come in and say hello to you and your friends," I said calmly. "Since dinner and drinks with them are more important than having dinner with your husband, I thought I'd like to meet these friends of yours." Tracy's face went completely white. Her eyes darted nervously toward the bar, clearly checking to see if Barry had returned. I could see the unease spreading across her features. "Why didn't you call?" she stammered. I cut her off. "Should I have to call you to let you know I'm stopping by? Why would I need to do that? Please, Alan, just leave before my friends come," she said. There was panic in her voice now. "Why such a rush?" I asked, my tone still controlled. "Can't I sit here and have a drink with you?" She seemed to struggle for words, clearly desperate to get me to leave before Barry came back. But it was too late. "Hey guys, she's with me." Barry's voice came from behind me. I turned around slowly. Barry approached, his voice casual. "Is he bothering you, Tracy?" he asked, looking at me with a faint smile. I stared him down. "It's you," Barry said, his grin fading slightly. "Sorry, but she's already occupied. I told you, I have a hot date tonight." "That's right, Barry," I said coolly. "And how do you know my name?" Barry looked confused. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Alan Harris, Mr. Harris, as in Mrs. Harris's husband." Barry took a step back, clearly caught off guard. "Sorry, man. I didn't know." "Didn't know what, Barry?" I pressed. "That she was married? Or that I was a fool who should have stayed home with our kids while you seduced my wife?" I glanced at Tracy. She looked paralyzed, unable to speak. I turned back to Barry. "Why don't we sit down and talk?" I suggested, my voice shockingly calm. Barry shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I'll just leave and let you two sort this out." "Barry, stop worrying so much," I said, gesturing for him to sit. "There won't be any trouble today, so just sit down." Barry hesitated but finally sat. I grabbed a chair from a nearby table and pulled it up, sitting down across from them. "Alan, it's not what you think," Tracy started, her voice pleading. I raised my finger to my lips, silencing her. "Tracy, I don't know what to think right now. I only know that it's not appropriate for a married woman to go on a date with her former lover." "Alan," Tracy tried again. I raised my finger again. "I know what you're going to say, that this was just dinner between two old friends. But I can't accept that explanation. If that were true, I would have been invited to join you, wouldn't I? You wouldn't have lied and told me you were going out with your girlfriends. And you certainly wouldn't have dressed like that. I paused, my voice softening for a moment. You look beautiful, Tracy, and it really upsets me to know you dressed like that for him. Barry finally spoke, trying to come to Tracy's defense. That's all it was. I'm just in town for the night and didn't want to eat alone. There was nothing more to it. I laughed bitterly. You didn't come all the way from Paducah to Cincinnati, pay $200 for a hotel room, just to have dinner with my wife. Barry opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. You had to come on business, right? Let's be honest. Assistant warehouse managers don't go on business trips, do they? Barry? Barry's face turned red, and he glanced nervously at Tracy, who still sat frozen in her seat, unable to meet my gaze. Barry sat back in his seat, silent. Tracy, on the other hand, hadn't looked at Barry since he returned to the table. Her gaze remained fixed either on me or her trembling hands. In a low, calm voice, I began to say what I had come here to say. Tracy, when I first found out about your plans for tonight, I was certain you would never go through with it. I was sure you loved me and would never hurt me like this. But over the past 2 weeks, I started to doubt your feelings for me. You hardly talked to me, and when you did, you couldn't even look me in the eye. I didn't know if it was because you couldn't bear to look at me anymore, or if you were afraid that your expression would reveal you didn't care about me. Tracy grabbed my hand, her lips parting as if to speak. I held up my hand to stop her. Let me finish, Tracy. I need to say this. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I couldn't understand how you could ignore me during the day, but as soon as the lights went out, you wanted to make love to me. It made me wonder if you actually wanted me, or if I was just fulfilling the physical part of some intimate fantasy you were playing out in your head. Have you thought about this, Barry? I said, turning to point at him. Barry's face tightened with anger, but he said nothing. Tracy's eyes filled with tears, though she wasn't crying yet. Her grip on my hand tightened. Please, Alan, she whispered, her voice breaking. I guess I was a fool, I continued, to think you wouldn't throw away 13 years of marriage for one night. But you know what hurts the most? That you didn't even care enough about our children to protect them from the consequences of your actions. That's when the dam broke. Tracy began to cry, her nails digging into my arm as her tears fell freely. I pulled my hand from her grip and stood up. The next move is yours, Tracy, I said, my voice steady. It's 7:30 now. I'm going home. I'll give you until 8:30 to decide. That should be enough time for you to say goodbye to Barry and get home. But it's not enough time for anything else. If you're not home by 8:30, I'll consider our marriage over. For a brief moment, I considered telling her what I'd learned about Barry, that he was a liar, a cheater, a fraud, but I stopped myself. Tracy needed to make a choice based on her feelings for me, not because she discovered how worthless Barry truly was. If she chose him in the end, she would deserve whatever she got. I don't want to waste any more of your time, I said. I'll get out of here. Maybe I'll see you at home, Tracy. With that, I turned and walked away. My anger and resentment burned inside me, but alongside them was a strange sense of pride. I hadn't lashed out at Barry. I hadn't raised my voice or called Tracy any names. I hadn't said anything cruel or unforgivable. I had made my feelings clear, and now the decision was hers. I had almost reached the exit to the hotel lobby when I heard Tracy shout, "Alan, please don't leave now." I didn't stop. As I walked back to the garage where my car was parked, I replayed everything I had said to Tracy. I felt confident I'd said most of what I wanted to say, but part of me wished I'd done something to Barry, something to make him as miserable as he'd made me. When you mess with a married woman, you should be ready to face the consequences. I drove home slowly, the windows down, trying to calm myself. I turned on the radio and attempted to sing along with a song to distract myself from the pain in my chest. It was no use. My thoughts kept returning to Tracy and our marriage. I figured the odds of Tracy being home by 8:30 were 50-50, and I felt like I was being generous. When I pulled into the driveway at 8:10, Sarah looked surprised to see me so early, but when she saw the look on my face, she didn't ask any questions. "Thank you for watching the kids, Sarah," I said, paying her. She left quickly, sensing something was wrong. I grabbed a beer from the refrigerator and took it into the living room. I turned on the TV, but the mindless comedy shows playing at that hour only made me feel worse. Frustrated, I turned it off and sat in silence, trying not to think about anything. But I couldn't. The closer it got to 8:30, the more worried I became. My palms were sweaty, my stomach knotted with anxiety, but I still drank a second beer, hoping it would calm me. At 8:30, the grandfather clock in the dining room struck the half hour. The sound made my heart drop. Slowly, I stood up, carried the beer bottle into the kitchen, and poured the rest of it down the sink. I left the empty bottle on the table and walked toward the front door. I looked out the window. The driveway was empty. "Tracy, damn," I muttered to myself as I turned off all the lights and headed upstairs. I checked in on Matthew and Lisa, who were both sound asleep, before going to my room to get ready for bed. As I climbed under the covers, I thought about how much my life was about to change. I turned off the bedside lamp and lay there in the dark, pretending that I could sleep. I had been in bed for no more than 5 minutes when I heard the front door open. I glanced at my watch, though I already knew what time it was. 8:45. She was 15 minutes late. What did it mean? Had it taken her that long to decide to come home? Did she have to promise Barry that she'd meet him again another time? Or was she just in no hurry to return home to me? I lay there debating whether to go downstairs and confront her or stay in bed and pretend to be asleep. But it was too early. Tracy would never believe I'd gone to bed so soon. After waiting a few more minutes and realizing she wasn't coming upstairs, I got up. I needed to resolve this tonight. I found Tracy sitting in the dark in the living room. Without saying a word, I walked into the kitchen, grabbed 2 bottles of beer from the refrigerator, and returned to the living room. I handed one to Tracy. When she looked at me, her eyes were red, her nose running. She had clearly been crying. I didn't say anything. Instead, I went to the bathroom, grabbed a box of tissues, and placed them on the coffee table in front of her. "Thank you," Tracy whispered. I sat down across from her and said softly, "I think it's your turn to talk, and my turn to listen." I kept my voice calm, non-threatening. Tracy looked at me with those sad eyes. "Alan, I need you to do something for me before I try to explain all of this to you." I frowned, feeling my frustration return. "Why am I obligated to do you any favors?" "It's not a favor," she said quietly. "I just need you to do it so you'll believe what I'm about to tell you." I didn't like where this was going. "What do you want me to do?" She hesitated. "I tried to call you at your office at 5 o'clock today, but you didn't answer. I also tried your cell phone, and you didn't answer that either." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you saying this all happened because I didn't answer my phone?" I asked incredulously. "In a way, yes," she admitted. "But you won't understand unless you listen to the voicemail I left for you when I called. Please, Alan, listen to the message, and then I'll tell you everything you want to know." I looked at her for a moment, trying to read her expression. Her eyes were pleading with me. Without another word, I stood up and walked toward the kitchen phone. As I did, I remembered the phone call at 5 o'clock, the one I ignored, and how my cell phone rang immediately afterward. I turned it off without even looking to see who was calling. Could Tracy be telling the truth about trying to call me? If so, how could listening to this voicemail possibly absolve her of dressing up and meeting Barry for what was clearly more than just drinks with friends? I glanced back at Tracy before leaving the room. She was staring at her hands, completely disconnected from her surroundings. I shook my head and picked up the phone, dialing the voicemail number and entering my password. There were 3 messages waiting. 2 were work-related, both coming in after 5 o'clock. Then I heard Tracy's voice. "Alan, I thought you'd still be in the office. You said you were going to work late. Call me when you get this message. I'll try to reach you on your cell phone after I leave this message. I've been thinking a lot about what you said recently. It occurred to me that I've been acting strangely toward you, and I didn't even realize how stupid I was being until yesterday when you challenged me about going out tonight. After thinking about what you said, I decided you were right. Our marriage is more important than an evening with friends. I wish I had thought of this sooner. I told you that my friends and I had planned this evening last week and that I couldn't change anything, but I thought maybe you and I could compromise. I could go out for drinks with the girls and then meet you at 8 o'clock at Anthony's for dinner. That way we could have a romantic dinner together and still get home to Sarah by 10 o'clock so I could show you how much I love you. I'll keep trying to call you, but if I don't hear from you by 8 o'clock, I'll just go home." The message ended. I stood there with the phone in my hand, my mind racing. Tracy had tried to call me. She had made a plan to meet me for dinner to reconnect. She had even thought about what I'd said and realized how much she'd been hurting me. And yet, instead of hearing her out, I ignored the call and shut off my phone. I hung up the phone and just stood there for a moment, feeling a mix of anger, guilt, and confusion. I had assumed the worst. "I'm going home now to change into something hot, so you can't resist me." The only 2 words that came to mind were, "Holy crap." She dressed like that for me, not for him. The situation finally began to make sense. Tracy chose me over Barry. We still had issues to resolve, but at the core of it, she came home to me. I walked back into the living room and sat down on the couch next to Tracy. Taking her hand in mine, I looked into her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Alan," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I don't know what I was thinking when I agreed to meet Barry for dinner. I knew you'd never approve, and that alone should have been enough for me to tell him no. You have to believe me. I never had any intention of sleeping with him. I thought we'd have dinner, talk about old friends, maybe dance, and then I'd come home. I thought I had everything under control." Tracy paused, searching for words. "I hated lying to you. That's why I couldn't look you in the eyes when we talked. I knew you'd see right through me." I looked at her carefully. "Did you really think Barry was only interested in talking to you?" Tracy hesitated and dropped her gaze. "No, and that's probably why I wanted to see him," she admitted. "I didn't want anything intimate to happen, but I guess I liked the idea that someone else wanted me." I had a few more questions I wanted to ask her, but right then, all I could think about was how much I loved her. More than anything, I wanted to hold her, make love to her, and tell her that everything was going to be okay. I placed my hands gently on either side of her face, pulled her close, and kissed her deeply. Tracy responded immediately, her tears mixing with the kiss. I stood up, took her hand, and said softly, "Let's go to bed and salvage what we can from this romantic evening." As we lay together afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Tracy whispered, "Earlier tonight, you said I wanted intimacy in the dark, but wouldn't look at you during the day. I wasn't having fantasies, Alan. I was afraid that if I looked at you, you'd see I was hiding something. But in the dark, I thought I could show you my feelings without words. I just want you to know that I love you, and I never, ever intended to do anything with Barry. This shouldn't have happened." I kissed her forehead. "It's over now. Do you want to talk about it?" she asked softly. No, I said. I think it's best if we leave it behind. For the first time in weeks, I fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. The next morning, Tracy and I had breakfast together. Just as I was about to leave for work, she stopped me at the door, kissed me, and said, "I love you." "I love you too," I replied. I felt good as I pulled out of the driveway. For the first time in weeks, it felt like things were back on track. But as I drove to work, my good mood started to unravel. Something gnawed at me, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. By the time I reached my office, my mind was racing, and the pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place. Tracy had chosen to come home last night. But why? Was it because she loved me? Or was it because she realized I might know what was going on? Did she agree to meet me at Anthony's so I'd think she had canceled on Barry, but then met him anyway to arrange their next meeting? I wanted to believe that wasn't the case. I needed to believe it, but I couldn't shake the lingering doubts. Her subtle hints, her strange behavior, it all pointed to something I still didn't fully understand. And then there was Barry. He had talked about how they danced and the kiss they'd shared. I wasn't confident anymore that I had saved my marriage. Maybe I had only delayed its inevitable end. At 10:30 a.m., as I sat at my desk trying to focus on work, a small notification appeared in the corner of my screen. Message from foxmanxxx.com. My heart sank. I stared at the screen, paralyzed. I waited until lunch before I opened Tracy's email. I no longer had the patience to wait until the end of the day. Barry's email read, Sorry about the confusion yesterday. How did he know you were going to meet me at the hotel bar anyway? I'll be back in Cincinnati in a month. Maybe we can try to meet then. I sat frozen, rereading the message. How did Barry know? Did Tracy tell him? Did he figure it out on his own? It took me 10 minutes to muster the courage to check Tracy's sent folder. My hands shook as I clicked on her response file, dreading what I might find. I hesitated, my heart racing. Finally, I opened it. I hesitated before opening Tracy's email, hoping against hope that her response to Barry would bring me some relief. The good news was there. Agreeing to meet with you was a big mistake, and I don't intend to repeat it. I think I was able to save my marriage, and I don't want to put it at risk again. Don't try to contact me again, Barry. I closed the email, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled deeply. A wave of relief washed over me, but lingering questions still gnawed at me. I told Tracy I didn't want to talk about it, and I decided to let it go. I would never get the answers to those questions, and that was something I'd have to accept. Life began to return to normal. Tracy was the loving wife she always was, and things were getting better between us. But despite the improvements, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. There were moments when I almost brought up Barry again, wondering why she had agreed to meet him in the first place. But everything else was going so well that I hesitated, afraid to rock the boat. Still, I couldn't let it go completely. I continued to check Tracy's email and listen to her phone calls. On a few occasions, when Tracy said she was working late, I drove by her office to make sure her car was there. I even called her office to confirm she was actually working. By mid-September, I started to realize how ridiculous I was being. I had spent so much time replaying everything in my head, trying to find answers. When one thing became clear, Tracy never stopped loving me. I still didn't know why she agreed to meet Barry, but I knew it was time to put it behind me and move on. I decided to stop spying on her and, for the first time, put my trust in her. Making that decision felt like a weight lifting off my chest. But that feeling was short-lived. One Saturday afternoon, after mowing the lawn, I came inside and heard Tracy talking on the phone. I didn't catch much of the conversation, but I did hear her say, "He just arrived. I need to go." "Who were you talking to?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "My mom. she replied quickly. She just wanted to talk. Something about her voice didn't sit right with me. It felt like she wasn't being completely honest, but I had no solid reason to argue with her. The following Monday, when I checked her email, I saw that there were no new messages. In fact, she had deleted all the old ones from that week. I began to suspect that Tracy had opened a new email account, but I had no way of finding out. The next week, Tracy's behavior started to resemble what it had been like before her date with Barry. She didn't talk to me much, and when she did, she couldn't meet my gaze. At night, when we went to bed, she would try to initiate intimacy. Was she planning to see Barry again? Or had she found someone new? Was it possible that the excitement she had felt from her brief affair with Barry had sparked something inside her, and now she was seeking it elsewhere? I felt the same pain in my stomach that I'd felt before, and my sleep started to suffer again. The following weekend, Jill, Frank, and their son, Frank Jr., came to visit. They joined us for the Reds game and stayed the weekend. We had a great time together, and I hoped that the positive atmosphere would help Tracy and me. Saturday night, we were all sitting in the backyard, drinking beer and grilling steaks. Tracy, Jill, and Frank were reminiscing about old friends when Frank brought up Barry Fox. "Have you reached Karen Fox yet?" Frank asked Tracy. "I tried calling her last week, but no luck." Tracy shook her head. "No, I haven't. I should probably call her soon." Frank then launched into a story about Barry, explaining how Karen had divorced him for having multiple affairs. He went on to tell Tracy about Barry's girlfriends in different cities and how Barry had faked business trips to visit them. Couldn't believe it. Frank had just told Tracy the truth about Barry without even knowing how much I already knew. Tracy didn't react right away. Her expression remained unchanged, and she didn't ask any questions. I couldn't tell how the news had affected her, whether it upset her or if she simply didn't care anymore. Although I didn't know how Tracy felt about the story, I was relieved that Frank had told her the truth about Barry. If she was still considering him as an option, maybe this would change her mind. By October, things were still tense between us. Tracy hadn't asked me what I wanted for my birthday, something she always did in previous years. I had the feeling that our marriage was already over, though no one had told me. On Friday morning, I woke up early and left for work before Tracy had gotten up. I tried not to get distracted, but my heart was broken. I couldn't understand how everything could be so good between Tracy and me, and then suddenly turn out so bad. By 11 a.m., I still hadn't accomplished anything. I was debating whether to take the day off as a sick day, unsure if I should go home or not. That's when I received the call. "Jack Ferris," my boss said, "our Lexington office is having network problems, and I need you to head there to fix it. Can Tom handle it?" I asked. "Tom's on vacation today," Jack replied. The Lexington office was about 85 miles away, so I arrived there around 1:30 p.m. When I walked in, they told me the network had already been restored. I was frustrated. I had come all the way to Lexington for nothing. Apparently, Tom had called from home and was able to resolve the issue over the phone. Brian Cadwell, the office manager, apologized for the inconvenience and invited me to grab a coffee at Starbucks before heading back to Cincinnati. I returned to my office at 4:15 p.m. There were 2 report requests waiting on my desk, with a note from Jack asking me to collect the data and finish the reports before leaving for the day. I was upset. He'd sent me to Lexington for nothing, and now he wanted me to stay late on a Friday night. But honestly, I had nowhere to go, and the idea of rushing home to a wife who wouldn't even speak to me wasn't appealing. So I decided to focus on the reports. It was something to occupy my time. Just as I was about to start, the message light on my phone blinked. I dialed my voicemail number and found one message. It had been left at 1:30 p.m. that day, and it was from Tracy. "Alan, I'm going out with some girls from work tonight. I might be late, so don't wait for me. I asked Sarah to come over before you get home, but don't be late. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Who was she trying to fool? I tried to convince myself that maybe she wasn't trying to deceive me, that maybe she was being honest about needing some space. But then I thought about it. Maybe she had made it clear that she didn't care if I knew. I picked up the phone and called Tracy's office, but they told me she had already left for the day. I called home next and Sarah answered. Has Tracy said where she's going? I asked. No, Sarah replied. How is she dressed? She was wearing jeans and a sweater. That didn't tell me anything. I tried calling Tracy's cell phone, but she didn't answer. I left a message asking her to call me, though I didn't hold out much hope. I wondered if there was some deeper meaning behind Tracy doing this to me on my birthday. Was she meeting someone else? If she didn't answer the phone, there was nothing more I could do. It occurred to me that maybe I shouldn't have interfered when Tracy went on that date with Barry. Perhaps if I had just let it happen, the affair would have been behind us, and I could have started rebuilding my life sooner. I tried to push these thoughts aside and focused on the reports. At 6:15, I was finishing up the second report when the phone rang. Alan, it was Jackie Winters. Hi, Jackie. How are you? I don't know what's going on, and maybe it's none of my business, Jackie said, her voice sounding urgent. But I think I should let you know. The tone in her voice alarmed me. What happened? I asked quickly. I was getting ready to leave at 5:30, standing in my office, when I saw Tracy check into the hotel. Did you know she rented a room here for the night? No, I didn't know, I replied, a cold knot forming in my chest. Is the room in her name? Yes, Jackie said, pausing. She left a note on the table for someone. Can you tell me who the note was for and what it said? I asked, anxiety rising in my chest. Jackie hesitated. You always ask for information I shouldn't give you. Why don't you just come here, and we'll talk when you arrive? Thank you, Jackie. I'll be there in a few minutes. I quickly finished the second report, sent both reports to Jack via internal mail, and then made the 10-minute walk to the Marriott Hotel. When I walked up to the front desk, Jackie came out from the office and led me down the hall to a quiet spot where we could talk. I'm sorry I have to be the one to tell you this, Jackie said, her voice low. You have to promise me that you won't do anything stupid. I nodded, trying to calm myself. Just tell me who the note was for, I said, feeling the urgency in my voice. Jackie paused for a moment before speaking. The note was addressed to someone named John. No last name. The envelope contained a key card to a room and a note that read, I'm in room 706. Come in, John. I had no idea who John could be. Has anyone picked up the note yet? I asked Jackie, my voice tight. No, she said. And no one can. The note's in my pocket, Jackie continued. I'm going to give you the key card to room 706. You can go up and talk to Tracy before this John person shows up. I've instructed the receptionist to call the room if he arrives while you're still talking to her. I nodded, understanding the risk Jackie was taking. You have to promise me you won't do anything stupid, Jackie warned, her eyes wide. I could lose my job if anything goes wrong. I promise, I said, my voice firm. I just need to talk to Tracy and figure out what's going on. Thank you, Jackie. I'm very grateful for your help, and I won't forget this. I took the key card from her and headed toward the elevators. The ride to the 7th floor felt like the longest and shortest elevator ride of my life. Part of me wanted to rush to Tracy's room and confront her, to end this nightmare. But another part of me dreaded what was about to happen, because I feared this confrontation might be the end of our marriage. When I reached the door to room 706, I hesitated. I stopped for a moment to listen. I could hear the sound of the TV, but nothing else. Taking a deep breath, I reached for the key card, but my hands were shaking. I had to use both hands to insert the card into the reader. The light on the reader turned red, and I quickly pulled out the card, double-checking the room number. Seemed right, until I realized I had inserted the key card upside down. I flipped the card over and inserted it again. This time, the indicator turned green. I pulled out the card, opened the door as quietly as possible, and stepped into the room. To my left, along the wall, was a closet with sliding mirror doors. One door was slightly open, and I could see a suitcase on the floor inside. Seeing the suitcase hit me like a punch in the gut. Tracy had no intention of returning home tonight. I wondered if she even planned to come back at all. To my right, the bathroom door was closed, and I could hear the sound of water running. I knew where Tracy was. "It's good that you're here," she called out. "I just got out of the shower. There's some beer in the ice bucket on the table. Help yourself, and I'll be out in a few minutes." My first instinct was to rush into the bathroom, grab Tracy by the throat, and demand answers. But I knew that wouldn't help. Nothing good would come from reacting with violence. Instead, I told myself I needed to stay calm and observe. I wanted to see how Tracy would present herself when she came out of the bathroom. Would she be naked or in a sexy nightgown? If she was, it likely meant that this wasn't the first time she had been with this John. But if she came out fully clothed, maybe this was their first time together. I walked into the bedroom, took a beer from the ice bucket, and sat down in a chair next to the table, staring blankly at the TV. I wasn't really watching it, my mind racing with questions. I finished about half of the beer when I heard the bathroom door open. Tracy walked out, heading straight for the closet without even glancing in my direction. Unfortunately, I wasn't in the mood to appreciate the view. Tracy leaned over, rummaging through her suitcase. When she spoke, "Our dinner reservation is for 7:30, so if you want, we have time to fool around a little." That's when I stood up and started walking toward her. I wanted to be close enough so that when she realized it was me and not John in the room, I could see the surprise and, hopefully, the fear in her eyes. When I was only about a meter away from her, I called her name. "Tracy." She straightened up immediately and turned toward me, her eyes wide with shock. She was holding something in her hand, but as soon as she saw me, she quickly hid it behind her back. I took a step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked directly into her eyes, waiting for the fear I knew she had to feel. But instead of fear, Tracy smiled. I was not prepared for this. I was stunned, unable to speak, as I tried to process what was happening. Did Tracy really care that I caught her? She had to know I would never hit her. And now she was going to humiliate me by confronting me with the fact that she had been waiting for another man in a hotel room. She didn't even seem interested in how I had found her. She was just calm. Alan, I expected, no, hoped that after a few seconds her initial reaction would change. But it didn't. She just kept smiling at me. I couldn't believe how calmly she was handling the situation. She didn't break eye contact, and I couldn't find the words to express my hurt. I tried to think of something sharp to say that would give me an edge in this confrontation, but before I could think of anything, Tracy surprised me again. She reached behind her back and handed me a large blue envelope with my name printed in bold letters. I stood there, staring at her in mute silence, unable to speak. "Happy birthday, darling," Tracy said, kissing me tenderly on the lips. Suddenly, my legs went weak. I had to take a step back and sit down on the bed. "What is this?" I stammered. "What's going on here?" "There are actually two things going on here," Tracy said, her voice steady. "First, this is your punishment for spying on me, listening to my phone calls, reading my emails, and not trusting me. And second, and most importantly, this is a surprise for your birthday." I bet you're really surprised, aren't you? I sat there, dumbfounded. Wait a minute. This is your idea of revenge? I spied on you a bit, and you decided to get back at me by having an affair with some guy named John. On my birthday. Who is John? I asked, feeling the sting of betrayal. I don't know who John is, Tracy said calmly. You left a note for a guy named John at the front desk with the room number and key, so don't try to pretend you're innocent. Who the hell is John? I repeated, my voice rising. I don't know who John is, Tracy said again with a slight smile. But I can tell you who the most important man in my life is. My head was spinning. Was she putting something in my beer? I didn't think she could do that, but the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. She had the upper hand in this confrontation, and I was failing to win her back. So when will he come? I asked, my voice thick with confusion. He's already here, silly, Tracy replied. Who's already here? I asked. You mean the person I love, the one who matters most to me. Haven't you figured this out yet? The realization of what she was saying began to sink in. My stomach churned. Okay. Then who is John? I asked again. There is no John, Tracy replied. John was just the name Jackie wrote on the envelope for me. Jackie? I asked, my mind racing. Was Jackie involved in this too? I needed someone to get you here without giving away what I was up to, Tracy explained. I didn't know what name Jackie would write on the envelope. I left it up to her because the name didn't matter as long as it wasn't Barry. I thought about using Barry's name, but I realized that would be too cruel. I didn't want you thinking I was just trying to make you crazy. A wave of realization flooded over me. I had been tricked. How many people were involved in this? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. Your boss, Tracy said. I needed him to keep you busy, so you wouldn't get my voicemail until it was too late to do anything. Sarah, because I needed her to explain what she should have told you if you called or showed up at home. Your parents, because they had to come home to pick up the kids for the weekend. There were a few others who helped me, like the office manager in Lexington, who told you the network was back up right before you arrived, and then kept you there longer than necessary. So, you did all this to punish me for spying on you? I asked, my voice tight. You dragged my family and friends into this? My behavior may have been out of line, but this was too much. This was cruel, Tracy. Jackie was the only one who knew the whole story. The others only thought they were helping me surprise you for your birthday. It wasn't supposed to go like this, Tracy said, her tone softening. At first, your birthday and the revenge were supposed to be two separate things. When I realized you were listening to my phone conversations and that you had discovered what I was up to, that's when I decided I had to do something to make you feel what I had felt. You were reading my emails, Tracy continued, her voice steady but tinged with hurt. I was upset, Alan. I felt hurt that you didn't trust me. Then you started checking up on me at work, calling my office when I had to work late. I know I put doubts in your head, but if you had just sat down with me, talked about what happened with Barry, and asked the questions that were bothering you right after it happened, I could have calmed you down. But instead, you refused to discuss it, letting your doubts eat away at you, causing you to lose trust in me. So I started acting the way I did before the Barry incident, thinking that once you noticed my behavior, you'd ask me about it, and we could finally talk about what we should have discussed 3 months ago. She paused, taking a deep breath. I had been planning this weekend for your birthday for over a month, she said softly. But when you decided to spy on me instead of confronting me, I stepped up my plan to teach you a lesson. I wasn't planning on going this far until Jill and Frank came to visit. I felt a wave of dizziness, mixed with both relief and anger. Tracy had no intention of having an affair, but the trick she had played on me was cruel. What did their visit have to do with this? I asked, still reeling from what she was revealing. It was obvious you thought my behavior meant I was planning to get together with Barry, Tracy said, her voice now more direct. Why did you decide to think that? I stared at her, confused. You made Frank tell you the story about Barry's divorce, right? How he had girlfriends in different cities. Yes, she answered, nodding. I needed Frank to tell you about Barry's character because you were afraid I was planning to get together with him. Even after I told you I never intended to have an affair with him, you still didn't believe me. I could almost forgive you for that, but when you brought Frank into it, using him to tell you about Barry, it was too much. You couldn't trust me enough to know I wouldn't be seduced by him, so you tried to make Barry look like a creep to make sure I lost interest. I raised my hand, stopping her. I was done listening without defending myself. Just one damn minute, I said, my voice firm now. First of all, regarding whether Barry is a creep or not, think about this. What do you call a man who tries to get a married woman to come into a hotel room with him, knowing it could ruin her marriage? I'd call him scum, wouldn't you? Makes me wonder, what were you thinking? You knew he was married, and you agreed to meet him anyway. Tracy's expression changed as she thought about it. I continued, feeling the weight of everything I had just said. Second, and more importantly, I said, I didn't ask Frank to tell you about Barry. Frank knows nothing about what happened that evening. I was trying to figure out a way to stop you from meeting Barry when he came to town. I called Frank and asked him if he knew Barry's phone number. I told him you wanted to reach out to his wife, Karen, because you missed her when we were in Paducah. I was planning to call Karen and tell her that Barry tried to get you to meet him at the hotel. I thought she could put an end to it. I paused, letting Tracy absorb what I'd just revealed. Frank told me that Karen had divorced Barry, I added. And then he told me about Barry's affairs and how he faked business trips to visit his girlfriends. Frank only brought this up because I told him you were interested in getting in touch with Karen. Tracy's eyes widened. Why didn't you tell me all this before I met Barry that evening? She asked, her voice shaky now. I wanted you to decide what you would do based on your feelings for me, I said quietly. I didn't want you to stay with me just because you found out that Barry was really just a creep. I wanted you to choose me because you loved me. Tracy came over and sat next to me on the bed, gently running her fingers through my hair. Let's do it now, she said softly. I know you have questions that are bothering you. Ask them now. I exhaled deeply, my mind still racing with everything that had just been said. I think it all goes back to that evening when Barry called you and I overheard the conversation. He made a comment about the way you danced. It seemed like it mattered to him. Tracy sighed. I think it meant something to him too, she said. I felt pretty good after the drink, and it was fun talking about old times with Barry. Then he asked me to dance. I didn't think anything was wrong with it, but when the orchestra started playing a slow number, he pulled me toward him. At first, I didn't think anything of it, but then he started getting too familiar. I stopped him, but I didn't push him away. We continued the dance. Why didn't you tell him on the phone that night that you didn't like what he was trying to do? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Because I didn't think it was important, Tracy said, her voice gentle but firm. I told him it was inappropriate, but I didn't want to make him feel bad. And it only happened because I was drunk. What about the kiss? Tracy suddenly kissed me on the lips. Just an ordinary kiss. That's exactly how I kissed him, Tracy said softly. I told Barry I needed to get back to you, and quickly kissed him goodbye. He was just trying to make it seem more important than it actually was, hoping to make me believe it. If you knew that, then you should have understood what he wanted when he asked you to meet him in Cincinnati, I said, my voice growing strained. When you agreed to meet him, you said it would just be dinner and conversation, then added that he shouldn't expect anything more. Telling him not to expect more is not the same as telling him there won't be anything more. You left him with the feeling that he still had a chance to get into your pants. Why did you do this? I asked, my frustration rising. Why did you agree to meet him? I don't know why it was so important to me, Tracy said quietly. Of course, I knew what he wanted, and I was flattered that he was interested in me, but not enough to start an affair with him. Barry was my first, and for most of that time we were intimate. The night was exciting because it was new to me, but Barry was a narcissistic egomaniac, and by the end of the summer, I realized I didn't love him and broke up with him. Barry kept saying I would get back to him and that the breakup was temporary. He told me I would always want him because he was my first lover. He said that women never forget their first lover. In one of his emails, Barry said that we should check if there was some kind of magic between us. I felt challenged by him. He said that if we were together, I wouldn't be able to resist him. The way he said we'd have dinner, talk, and then see what happens made me want to prove him wrong. I wanted to show him there was no magic between us. I wanted to show him that I could spend the evening with him and not go to bed with him. I guess I was so focused on the need to prove him wrong that I forgot about what was most important in my life. About you and the children. I started to ask another question, but Tracy stopped me. It's 7:15, and we have dinner booked for 7:30. You still need to change, she said. We can continue this conversation later. Okay? But what should I change into? My loving husband, I already am. But I didn't bring a change of clothes with me. I stared at her, confused. You didn't bring? Don't worry, I brought clothes for you. They're in the closet. Hurry up and get ready, Tracy said, her smile returning. I quickly washed my face and put on gray trousers and a dark blazer. When I came out of the bathroom, Tracy was talking on the phone. Yes, we are going to dinner, she said into the phone. Thank you very much for your help. Who was that? I asked, walking over to her. I just wanted to call Jackie and tell her everything went well. It worked out, didn't it? I guess so, but I still think your trick on me was too cruel, I said, my voice still a bit strained. Perhaps you're right, and I am very sorry. If I had known you didn't put Frank up to telling those stories about Barry, I would have ended it last week. Tracy kissed me gently and then grabbed my hand. We headed toward the elevator. As we walked, Tracy spoke softly. I'm serious about answering all your questions about what happened. I just hope you've learned a lesson from this. If you think something is wrong, talk to me about it. I understand, I said quietly. If I had told you I overheard that first phone call, everything would have ended there. She nodded, her expression softening. This doesn't mean it's all your fault, but the fact that you had this information and didn't act on it surprises me. You were always so proactive. You usually don't let things slide. I nodded in agreement. In hindsight, you're right. I should have acted immediately. But the situation was so emotionally charged that I had trouble thinking clearly. The point is, I said, regardless of the reasons, you shouldn't have agreed to meet him that evening. As we exited the elevator into the lobby, I stopped and took Tracy's hands in mine. We both screwed up big time, I said. Let's leave this in the past now. Tracy didn't say anything at first. She just took my hand, and we started walking toward the restaurant. Suddenly, Tracy stopped and pulled me in the other direction. We may, she began, trailing off as she led me toward something I didn't expect. We may be a few minutes late, Tracy said, guiding me down the hallway toward one of the meeting rooms. There's something I'd like you to see. For example, there's a special sale on golf equipment. I thought you might find something there that I could give you for your birthday to make up for the lousy trick I pulled on you. We walked down the hallway, but when we reached the door to the room Tracy was looking for, it was closed. Looks like we're late, I said, glancing at my watch. I hear there are people in there, Try to open the door, Tracy suggested. The door wasn't locked. As soon as it opened, Tracy pushed me inside. I was taken aback, confused by her urgency. But when I turned to look at her, I realized there were a lot of people in the room. Before I could process what was happening, I heard a loud chorus of "Happy Birthday." I stood frozen in surprise. Looking around, I saw my parents, Tracy's parents, Matthew and Lisa, Jackie and her husband, my boss, and a few of our friends. When I turned back to Tracy, she was smiling brightly, clearly delighted by my shock. She kissed me softly and whispered, "Happy birthday, dear." For the next 20 minutes, I walked around the room, greeting my friends, thanking them for coming, and agreeing with them that I was lucky to have a wife like Tracy. Finally, we sat down at the table with Matthew, Lisa, and our parents. My father raised his glass of wine. "Happy birthday, son," he said. Everyone at the table clinked their glasses together, including Matthew and Lisa, before drinking. Tracy took just a small sip of her wine, then turned to me, running her fingers through my hair. She leaned down and gently kissed me on the cheek, right next to my ear. "I hope you know how much I love you," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "I have another surprise for you. I'm pregnant." I turned to look at her beaming face, feeling a wave of disbelief mixed with joy. "Is it true?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Tracy simply nodded, her smile growing wider. I took her face in my hands and kissed her deeply on the lips, overwhelmed by the news. "I take it you're happy?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "This is a much better gift than those golf clubs," I said, feeling my heart swell with happiness. Reflecting on the events of the day, I couldn't help but wonder about the complexities of relationships. In this story, the presence of longtime ex-boyfriends or old friends seemed to stir complications, causing emotional turmoil. While it may not always lead to disaster, it certainly can have a significant impact on the lives of those involved. What do you think? Should longtime ex-boyfriends or old friends play a role in someone's life when they are in a committed relationship? See you in the next video.